Hello and welcome to Lyme Disease, Hidden in Plain Sight. Seems you can't look around without finding some news about Lyme disease, some celebrity who's coming forward stating that they've had Lyme disease. It seems to be the hot disease. Even so, according to the CDC, most people aren't at risk. You can see here in this map of the eastern part of the United States, the eastern half of the United States, that there are only a few areas that are in high risk. There are a few areas where there's a mild risk, but for the most part, according to the CDC, it's low risk. And that includes a little green spot there up in the Adirondacks. Till recently, the CDC estimated there are only 30,000 cases of Lyme per year. However, in August of 2013, they took a look at their reporting system and decided it wasn't that great. They felt they were only catching 10% of the cases, so they increased the estimate yearly to 300,000. Well, I'm here today to tell you that they're still probably wrong, and I'll give you the reasons why. And it may be as high as 3 million cases per year, and that's why you're starting to see so much emphasis on Lyme disease. It's not that the disease is spreading, it's that the awareness is spreading. It's been with us all along, and now we're finally starting to diagnose it a little better. One of the problems with Lyme disease is that it's not easily detected. The tests are not very good. So the measurements we have aren't giving us a true look at the spread of the disease and how many people have it. The journey I'm going to take you through today with this presentation is a little bit like Through the Looking Glass for Alice. At the start of this presentation, things are going to seem normal and cozy, and by the end of it, might seem a little bit weird. Hi, my name is McKay Rippey. I'm a licensed acupuncturist. I live with my family in Deansboro. This is my daughter Gabrielle. We're getting ready to put up our 8-foot Christmas wreath on the barn that we put up every year. You might have figured out by now that I'm wired a little bit differently. But hopefully by the end of this, you'll see things my way. My Lyme story started about 12 years ago. I was down in Ghent, which is a small town on the Hudson River. And I came back, and after a few days, felt really terrible. And I remember the Sunday morning, it was early, I dragged myself to the bathroom just feeling sorry and miserable for myself. And there on my left arm was a bullseye rash. Now, I was very, very lucky. I got immediate treatment with doxycycline, about 2 weeks worth. I also followed up with some Chinese herbs and some acupuncture. But because of my experience and the increasing prevalence of Lyme disease in my area, I practice in Clinton, New York, I created Lyme Ninja Radio. It's a podcast for and about people with Lyme disease. You can check us out. We're on SoundCloud and iTunes. Now, all the fuss is about that little critter you see on the right. That's a deer tick, and that's in the nymph stage. You can see how tiny they are and how it might be easy to miss one of those if it was hidden behind your ear, in your scalp, someplace hard to see or hard to find. Again, here's a comparison in terms of size. You can see compared to the dime how small these ticks can be. At the top of the black-legged tick, the deer tick, and there's also the Lone Star tick and the dog tick by comparison. So the black-legged tick in its immature stages can be quite tiny. And all these stages can transmit Lyme disease. Now inside these ticks, this is what all the fuss is about. That's the Borrelia bacteria, a clump of them. You can see they have this spiral shape. They're called spirochetes, spirochete bacteria. And if you happen to get these inside you from the tick or from other insect, in fact, life can be pretty miserable if you're not treated properly and quickly. Remember this Star Trek episode, The Trouble with Triples? Well, that's part of what I want to talk to you about today. The trouble with Lyme testing, you see, not enough tests are done. There are too many false negatives, and sometimes the wrong test is done or a proper test isn't even available or invented yet. And that's why I think the actual number of Lyme cases still is vastly underreported. So let's look at this about not enough tests are done. And one of the first reasons not enough tests are done is there's resistance on the part of physicians to test for Lyme. They hear from the local health departments and from their professional associations that Lyme doesn't exist in their area. In fact, you saw that map earlier showing just the red areas, how concentrated they are. So if you don't live in one of those rare areas, they're going to say, oh, we don't have Lyme disease here. It can't be Lyme. So they don't even do the tests. This is an Lyme disease map created by the CDC, and it shows the number of cases from 1990 all the way up to 2013. And it was at that point where they looked at their testing and said, oh my goodness, we don't have enough. So they increased the estimate from 30,000 to 300,000. And here we are in New York, and I want to point out where Old Forge is. This is where this presentation was originally presented, at the oil well in Old Forge. And here's that same CDC data broken down. And you can see the blue areas are highest prevalence of Lyme, green, moderate, and yellow, not very prevalent at all. I believe what you're actually seeing here in this map is the awareness of Lyme disease and how many physicians are testing for and looking for Lyme disease. You can't tell me that from the eastern portion of the state there to Herkimer County and Old Forge, right, in between in St. Lawrence County, there are no ticks there. There's nobody with Lyme disease. There has to be. It's just not being reported. So that's why you see this blotchy map, and it's not consistent. Lyme disease detection requires physicians to be aware of it and be willing to do the tests. And not all of them are able or willing, or maybe educated. It's not a conspiracy. It's just that they're getting information that's not sufficient from their professional societies. Now here's another map. This is the vet map. You can see it looks similar to the other one, but the area of high risk is vastly expanded. You see it travels down the Mississippi there, all of Wisconsin, a lot of Minnesota, all the way through Pennsylvania, most of New York, into Maryland, West Virginia, and Virginia, even down into North Carolina. So this is a veterinary association, the Companion Animal Parasite Council, put out this map. So you can see vets have a different awareness about it. They're not as blinded. Their professional societies aren't telling them. They have better reporting, I believe. And this map is from a company who does testing for dogs and Lyme disease. And they're just pointing out the difference in the CDC data being reported. These are cases from the year 2000 to 2006. And for example, in Maine, canine cases, there were 3,902. And for humans, only 1,383. That's almost 4 times. It's more like 3.5 times as many cases of dogs. Now, every dog I know, almost every dog, has an owner, and they live in close proximity. So even if it was just half as many people as dogs, there would still be a vast increase in the number of Lyme cases. Take, for example, Colorado. You can see 998 cases of Lyme and only 1 human detection. They're just not testing for Lyme out there. The vets are. The vets are testing, and they're finding it. Now, the other important thing about this map, this only represents 1 lab. There are more than 1 lab who tests for Lyme disease for dogs. So this is only 1 lab's data. It's disturbing. It shows that for humans, we're just not finding it because we're not looking for it. Here's that same data broken down by county in New York. There we are. That little red dot is Old Forge again. And you can see, according to this map, and the canine community, Herkimer County is a high-risk area. To the right is St. Lawrence County. There's zero risk there because obviously the vets there don't use this lab, and that's what would be zero. But you can see that the map is much different than what you saw for the public health department for humans on the side, showing Herkimer County as only moderate risk. So I've shown you that not enough tests are done and a few of the reasons why that's the case. The second reason is there are false negatives. Now I want to show you a short clip from a local cable news about why, or really the impact of false negatives. It interviews a nurse practitioner from the Stram Center in Albany about the reasons, and also a couple patients and their experience with being treated and what happens when a false negative is given and the person can't get treatment. So here we go.
Elizabeth Metcalf spends most of her day on the computer, mostly searching for fish antibiotics, even though she doesn't own a fish tank.
So there's dogfish and catfish in my tank, which is my body, and it's just...
She's actually searching for drugs to self-treat her Lyme disease. She knows that there are some risks to self-medicating via the internet, but after seeing countless doctors with no results, she feels it's her best option, because she is one of the 25% who receive a false negative on the test.
Often people would bring up Lyme disease, and my response is, Lyme was a negative. I didn't know that there was a problem with testing.
But what is Lyme disease and what's wrong with the testing? Lyme is caused by the Borrelia bacteria, which is carried inside of most ear ticks. When the tick bites a human, it can pass the bacteria on and infect them. The normal signs are a tick bite, a bullseye rash around the area, and flu-like symptoms. But more than half of Lyme sufferers don't remember any of these symptoms. Board-certified nurse practitioner Jennifer Manger of the Stram Center says there are problems with the test.
The testing has a very high rate of false negatives as opposed to false positives, and the testing is also strain specific. So the standard Western blot and the ELISA test, which are the standard blood tests that we have for Lyme disease, looks at one strain of Borrelia. There are hundreds of strains out there. There are probably 6 to 12 that are endemic to this area. So that alone makes it a very insensitive test.
And according to the CDC, the diagnosis for Lyme shouldn't be determined solely by blood tests, and instead by your doctor after looking at your symptoms and medical history.
We've known there is such a thing as Lyme disease for 40-some years. There's no excuse for not having better testing available.
Oh my gosh, look at you, you're like running. Yeah, awesome.
But finding a doctor who not only knows about Lyme disease, but is also comfortable with treating it, is leading a lot of people to look outside of the Syracuse area and travel as far as Albany. One of those patients traveling almost 2.5 hours is Martha Conan, and she says that she used to make a longer trek.
Prior to this, I was going to Virginia, flying to Virginia.
Martha has also invested a lot of money into her treatment.
First year, I paid $110,000 out of pocket.
The large amount is because she needs specialized care that isn't covered by her insurance. But this year has been cheaper.
Because it's closer. $55,000 out of pocket.
For patients like Martha who are able to test positive and find treatment, a support group is important. She attends one in Chittenango that's led by recovering Lyme patient Debbie Collins. Debbie says the support group focuses on being your own advocate and asking the right questions.
How can we discuss things with our doctors? What kind of questions can we ask? So now we have monthly meetings and we just get together. Sometimes we bring in physician's assistant and just give helpful, health-minded advice or explanations.
Debbie says that taking charge of your health care is the first step in treatment and rekindling hope.
Because people want hope. If we can't get it from our doctors, they're going to get it, unfortunately, whatever way that they can find outside of that.
As for Beth, without strong financial support and a positive test, she continues to seek alternative ways to a cure.
Like doxycycline for fish in the super convenient economy size of 500.
All in hopes of reversing some of the damage to her heart, liver, and nervous system caused by her Lyme disease.
If anyone's going to kill me, it's going to be me at this point. So, the bacillin, yeah, but this has to be refrigerated. What stinks about this is it's a 20-gauge needle. The physician friend I have said, "Do you understand how much this will hurt?" I'm like, "No, that's probably good. It's ceftriaxone. This is Linger's lactate."
And 5 years from now is still a mystery.
I don't see 5 years from now. Would I like it? I'm afraid to hope.
Amber Smith, NCC News.
You can hear from that story how devastating untreated Lyme can be. According to Dr. Horowitz, who's a Lyme literate expert, he's further down, his offices are further down the Hudson in the Poughkeepsie area. About 50% of all tests are incorrect. So that means if a patient is able to convince his or her doctor to get a test, A, and B has it done, there's a 50-50 chance, a coin flip chance, that the test comes back negative and it's incorrect. In fact, Dr. Carol Bavenzi, she's a Lyme literate pediatrician in Albany, gives a talk where she gives 22 reasons why your Lyme test could be incorrect. And I'll just give you a couple of those to give you a flavor. Number one is, she says, you were recently infected and tested before your body produced Lyme antibodies. So it takes your body a little bit of time to figure out what the Lyme disease is and create antibodies. In fact, when I was bit by the tick and had the bullseye rash, I was tested right away in less than a week. It was more like 5 days after the bite, I believe. And the test came back negative, but clearly it was Lyme disease. Number 8 on a list of 22 reasons is there are no free spirochetes in the body fluid on the day of the test. So spirochetes can change shape, change form. They can burrow into tissue. They're very good at hiding. It's a stealth pathogen. Like a strep throat is a frontal pathogen. It's right there up front. It's easy to treat, easy to test for because it's not hiding out in the body. It's just attacking your throat, right? That's why you feel so bad with strep throat. Lyme disease isn't like that. It doesn't want to be found. It has many strategies to evade detection and treatment. And let's see, let's go here to number 13. Number 13 is you have an immune deficiency. So maybe you're weak for another reason. You've had a virus or something that's beat down your immune system, or you're tired or worn down or stressed out. So your immune system isn't mounting a strong response. I think that's one reason why people do not get a rash or a bullseye rash from a bite. And let's go to number 22. I think this is really important. The CDC testing criteria is designed for epidemiological study and not clinical diagnosis. In other words, the testing that's done was designed to track the spread of the disease throughout the U.S. and the world, so to speak, and not as a clinical diagnosis. It's not sensitive enough. The people who develop the test know that, but because doctors are so busy that they fall back on this test because they don't have enough training to make a clinical diagnosis. So you can see there is indeed trouble with testing. Not enough tests are done, way too many false negatives. And the last point is the wrong test. So there are many co-infections or similar type of infections that happen and get transmitted along with the Lyme disease. So we heard the nurse practitioners say there were somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 different strains of Borrelia. Lyme disease is actually one strain, one specific strain, Borrelia burgdorferi. Now, if there are 99 other types of Borrelia out there and you're only testing for one, chances are you may miss a few, right? It's similar to saying that, imagine how many different breeds of dogs there are. And if you were bit by a Chihuahua and they ran a test for being bitten by a Labrador Retriever and said, nope, you don't have signs of being bit by a lab, therefore you weren't bit. But you're saying, doctor, I was obviously bit. And I said, well, it's not Lyme disease. So that's the way the testing works. There are other co-infections, Babesia, you can see on the slide here, Bartonella, Ehrlichia, Anaplasmosis, Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Then there's the vague diagnosis of relapsing fever. There are viruses like the Powassan virus. So there's so much out there. And the Lyme test that most people are given is for one strain of Borrelia only. So Lyme disease or tick-borne diseases are a much broader category. So it's a mistake just to talk about Lyme disease. It's a mistake. It's not broad enough. That's the Borrelia burgdorferi. That's what it looks like. It's spelled. And there are over 100 simply 100 different strains of the Borrelia. Burgdorferi is just one strain of that. This is Steve Jobs. He's famous for ending his presentations by saying, but wait, there's one more thing. And but wait, I want to join Steve. There's one more thing, and that's misdiagnosis. Now, again, the test was designed not for a clinical diagnosis, but for public health survey, just to get an overview of where the disease is spreading. But doctors are too busy and they don't have the training. They really need to be supported in getting the training. But if they're told by their professional organizations that there's none of this disease in their area, why would they waste their time? So we get lots of misdiagnoses, and here are just some of them. Autism, chronic fatigue syndrome, Crohn's disease, early ALS, early Alzheimer's disease, encephalitis, Fifth's disease, which is a rash-based disease for children, GERD, and the reflux disease, infectious arthritis, interstitial cystitis, irritable bowel syndrome, juvenile arthritis, lupus, Meniere's syndrome, MS, multiple sclerosis, osteoarthritis, prostatitis, psoriatic arthritis, so psoriasis-based arthritis, psychiatric disorders. This is huge. So many people are affected just mentally that it may seem like they've got psychiatric problems. In fact, it's an infectious problem. Raynaud's syndrome, reactive arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, scleroderma, Sjogren's syndrome, sleep disorders, thyroid disease. So you can see there are many, many misdiagnoses. Oh, and one that didn't make this list that should be on here is Bell's palsy. That's a frequent infection. It's not necessarily just a viral thing. It can be a bacterial infection as well and a sign of Lyme disease. But wait, there's even one more thing. And that's the phenomenon that's generated again by these CDC guidelines and the Infectious Disease Society guidelines, saying that Lyme disease is difficult to catch, it's easy to test for and detect, and then it's easy to treat. So once you've had your 2 weeks of antibiotics, that's it, the Lyme disease is gone. In fact, that's not the case. So let's take a look at one of these misdiagnoses and see why that might not be the case. So this is brain pictures of brains with and without Alzheimer's disease. So on the left is the normal brain. You can see it's healthy and robust. And on the right-hand side, now this is an early stage Alzheimer's disease. This is advanced. And you can see how the brain is shriveled and the big gaps in there. And then on the cross-section of it, how much brain mass is actually missing. Now, an exciting study just came out. It was announced May 5th, about a year ago. And there's new clarity in the fight against Alzheimer's. And what this physician is showing, this Harvard doc is showing, is that they figured out that the plaques, the amyloid plaques in the brain, are actually an immune response. So the plaques are forming because there's some sort of infectious agent inside the brain. This is exciting research for them. However, this man, Dr. Alan McDonald, he's a retired pathologist. He's here throwing his hands up in the air saying, of course, I've been trying to tell you this for the past 15 years. See, he got brain tissue from Harvard, from the brain bank, and was able to culture Borrelia burgdorferi from 7 out of the 10 samples that he got. So in this particular very small study, 70% of the Alzheimer's brains had Borrelia. In fact, Borrelia that could be grown. And that's kind of a scary thought, because here's brain tissue from a dead person that's been frozen for who knows how many years, and he was still able to grow live bacteria out of that tissue. So this, you can see what I mean by Borrelia. Lyme disease is a stealth pathogen. It has many ways of surviving for a very long time. Now, do you recognize this handsome fellow? This fuzzy photograph is of Chris Christopherson. Now, he was also recently in the news, one of our celebrity Lymies. There's an interview in the Rolling Stone, and apparently Chris has been really suffering with memory problems that really been affecting his life. And the doctor said, well, you either have Alzheimer's disease, or as a young man you played too much football, rugby, and you boxed too much, and you have brain damage, and there's not a lot we can do. However, as you can imagine, there's more to that story. Lisa, his wife, this is from the interview, is wearing one of her husband's tour merchandise shirts. After he gave up his Alzheimer's and depression pills and went through 3 weeks of Lyme disease treatment, Lisa was shocked. He was taking all these medications for things he doesn't have, and they all have side effects. All of a sudden, he was back. There are still bad days, but some days he's perfectly normal, and it's easy to forget that he's even battling anything. See, what happened was Chris's doctor decided to test for Lyme disease, and in fact, he was one of the lucky ones. It came back positive. So they treated him for Lyme disease instead of for Alzheimer's, and lo and behold, he got better. Is the world starting to look a little bit different to you? 30,000? 300,000? Probably more like 3 million. See, maybe I'm not that weird after all. I want to leave you with a thought. Really, this is what's keeping Lyme disease as a problem, is the mindset that it's, again, from this infectious disease people, that it's hard to catch, it's easy to diagnose, and easy to treat. In fact, it's 100% wrong. Lyme disease is very easy to contract. It's difficult to detect and test for, and it can be extremely difficult to treat. What it's requiring, where we are right now, remember this guy, Wilson, Tool Time Tim? Lyme disease is really diagnosed over the backyard fence. It's neighbors talking to neighbors. It's being aware of it and saying, you know what? That sounds like Lyme disease. Have you thought about being checked out for Lyme? And if you are going to get checked out, you want to go to a Lyme literate doctor, somebody who's able to do a clinical diagnosis. And you can look for Lyme literate doctors on the internet. There's an organization called ILADS, the International Lyme and Associated Disease Society. And find one of those docs, and they can help get a true diagnosis. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. I had tons of fun up in Old Forge at the Oiled Well. And if you like what you've heard here and want to know more, go ahead and like me on Facebook.